Hi again, everybody. So this is the next part, the third part of my testimony. Uh, I had left off where I said that I just got back into my body after this out-of-body experience, talking to what I now know are demons. Um, I left the house that I was at to go back home, and I was really tired, and I decided to lie down on the lawn of this Chinese food restaurant. And I was just laying there resting and thinking, I gotta go home, but I'm afraid to do anything. Like, I felt like I couldn't even hardly move. And I was looking up at the sky. It was October. It was fairly cold out, so I was getting cold, and I was like, I gotta go home. And I lifted up my head, and I turned and I looked, and the middle school of my town was right across the street, and there was a police car parked right there. Now, the police in my town would always bother you if you were like young like me and out at 4 in the morning, which it was around that time. They'd be questioning you, who are you, what are you doing, where are you going? And I'm laying here in the middle of the main street on the ground, and they're seeming like they don't even see me. Like, I was afraid to even get up because I thought, well, maybe they don't see me, but if I get up and walk away, then they're definitely going to notice me. And there's no way they couldn't have seen me. I was like directly in front of them. And I got up and walked away. They didn't bother me. I went home and I woke up my mom, told her how I had this experience, that I thought maybe they were Satanists or they put something in my acid. I didn't know what happened. And I laid down in the bed with her, and finally I was able to go to sleep after a while. And she went over to that guy's house and like confronted him, and of course I like still had relations with him, and he became my boyfriend for a while. And we talked about that, and I told him kind of what had happened, and I thought like it was some kind of Satanist, and he just laughed it off like, no, that was the drugs. And I tried taking acid a few times after that, and every time I tried to take acid, I had a bad trip, and I thought Satan was trying to take over my mind, and there was all these weird people would act weird and evil and say weird stuff, and I'd be like, what? And so actually that prompted me to go to AA for the first time and quit using drugs and alcohol. Like, I knew it was getting out of hand. I didn't want my daughter to grow up with a mom on drugs and alcohol and have a terrible childhood like I had had. So I started going to AA, and they, of course, part of the AA program is they recommend that you find a higher power, some kind of God, to help you stay sober because you can't do it yourself. And I kind of went along with that. Like, I tried things like trees and spiritual principles, but I didn't want to believe in God. I felt like the God I knew like hated me, didn't care about me, didn't love me. And at that same time I started to admit that I had feelings, sexual feelings towards women, and I ended up like having this first encounter with a woman when I went to a 12-step conference. And after that, like, I broke up with my boyfriend, the same guy that I, had sex with when I was on LSD and I thought was a Satanist. He ended up getting sober too, because I basically was like, I'm not going to see you anymore if you're not going to quit drinking and using drugs with me. So we both had been going to AA, and he was talking about how he wanted to marry me. And then I went to this recovery conference and met this lesbian woman and had a sexual encounter with her, and I went home. I came back home to Vermont, and I broke up with him. I didn't tell him why, and I started, having a long distance relationship with her. And that was the beginning of my 20 years in homosexuality. I stayed sober for quite a while, for about close to 10 years. I had a couple little relapses here and there. But I had moved to New York City, and I hung out with lots of other young, sober people. And I mean, we didn't use drugs or alcohol, but we certainly weren't, we still did lots of sinful things. Went out to clubs all the time. You know, I was promiscuous. Not certainly living a godly life. And then I moved back to Vermont because my daughter was getting close to being a teenager soon, and I thought it would be better for her to live here in Vermont than New York City. And I didn't stay connected to AA, and I started telling myself, well, I was just drinking like crazy and using drugs when I was younger in that manner because I was depressed and I was just trying to make myself feel better. I'm not really an alcoholic, so I started drinking. And at first it was just, you know, a little bit, a couple times a week, a couple beers, and then, you know, I started smoking some weed, and then I did a little bit of mushrooms, and I tried ecstasy, and you know, it just got worse and worse. I got involved in the underground music scene. I had one failed lesbian relationship after another. I had been pretty active in the gay and lesbian rights movement. I was at the 1993 March on Washington for gay rights. I was fully involved in the gay lifestyle. And I didn't think it was wrong. I thought that, you know, what the Catholic Church taught and what other Christians taught was not right, that I didn't want to believe in a God that would hate me and want to send me to hell. And so, you know, I was totally in rebellion and rejected anything to do with the Bible. I mean, I went actually to a gay and lesbian church for a while when I lived in New York City, but they taught, you know, that people were misinterpreting the Bible, that Paul said that homosexuality was wrong just because that was part of his culture, and he couldn't understand why one man would want to have sex with another man, that it wasn't really a word from God that he got, that it was his own ideas that he put into the Bible. I know now that's wrong, but that's what I thought. I had also been involved with pagans and Wiccans. I had a bunch of friends in New York City that were witches, and I used to be part of, you know, witchcraft ceremonies. My friend who was a witch would always say, oh, I think you are a witch too, and she like gave me tarot cards for a Halloween gift one year, and I used to read tarot cards, which everybody thought I was pretty good at, but I never was good at joining things, so I never like became part of a coven or anything. And so, yeah, I went backwards there, but I was back in Vermont, and I was fully entrenched back into drugs and alcohol. I had been diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is an autoimmune disease, and basically your colon is, you're allergic to yourself, and my colon, my large intestine would get inflamed, and I'd have bleeding and pain and diarrhea, and I would lose weight, and I couldn't eat anything when I was sick, but when I was fine, when I was well and I wasn't having a flare-up, I would be able to eat and drink whatever I wanted, did all kinds of drugs, coke. I had gone back to using LSD, mushrooms, ecstasy. I even was smoking crystal meth. And I smoked cigarettes, which actually prevents flare-ups for people with ulcerative colitis. And so I had gotten involved with this woman, and we got a civil union, which a few years back, before gay marriage was legalized in Vermont, that was what gay marriage was, civil unions, and we had gotten in a civil union, and we were living the gay dream. and doing lots of drugs. She was a professional. She was a professor. I was a nurse. I had been a licensed practical nurse for a long time, and during the daytime I was a good worker. I was, seen as a good nurse. Lots of people thought well of me. And then at night and the weekends I would be partying it up and doing all kinds of sinful, filthy things. And even during the whole time that I called myself a lesbian, I would have sex with men when I would get drunk or high and there was no women around to have sex with. I would cheat on my girlfriends and have sex with men on the side, and I would never tell anybody. I had sex with gay men. Gay men would proposition me to have sex with them. And, it was just a sinful, lustful, egotistical, prideful, filthy, dirty kind of life I was living. And now's another good point. Well, maybe I'll do a few more minutes. I got really ill with my ulcerative colitis about seven years ago. I quit smoking cigarettes because it was affecting my, ability to go out and dance and to play softball. I was playing softball in a league, and I was afraid I'd get lung cancer, and so I quit smoking. And I got this really bad flare-up where my entire large intestine got inflamed, and I got a blood infection, and I was basically really close to death, and I ended up in the hospital, and I had to have my large intestine taken out. And I had a central line, which is a big, huge IV. If you're getting lots of caustic drugs through an IV, they put it in what's called a central line, so you don't burn out all your peripheral veins. And I had this central line, and the night before I was supposed to get my large intestine taken out in surgery, I got a blood clot, and you can die from a blood clot. And I got really scared, and I thought the central line was in my arm. I didn't even want to move my arm when I was on the ultrasound table. When they told me I had this blood clot, I was afraid to even move my arm. And the technician left me to go call the doctor, and I was left there by myself, and I started to panic. And now I will take a break, and you'll see more in the next part. May Jesus bless you, and I hope you continue to watch my testimony. And that's it.